Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, and what a full room and a full house we have tonight. I know it's not just for me, but I'm blessed and thankful and excited to be here. I do have a PowerPoint presentation that Chris is going to help me with. A couple of things I might mention. I was hoping that our Tarrant County Field Director, Sam Sheets, would be here and help me hand out some material. So I have most of the things I'm going to be discussing, I have over on the table over there, and we'll get that handed out to you also. I might mention, first let me ask a quick question. How many of you do get our weekly email updates or hear from me or Mike Hassan, our new Texas Director? A good number of you do. I hope all of you will sign up to do so. Let me say, if you will either sign up or give us a business card, we'll do a drawing for a ticket, a free ticket to our Defending the American Dream Summit. Have any of you attended our national summits in the past? What did you think of it?
That was great. Orlando.
Orlando.
Just about a year ago.
Usually they're in Washington, D.C. Last year we were in Orlando. Guess where we are this year? We are so excited. We are right there in Dallas. And it's especially exciting for me because it was 1984 when I was the director of the Republican National Convention when Ronald Reagan was renominated right there in Dallas. So for me, it seems like just yesterday. And I'm sure it was just a baby. You're supposed to say, oh, you don't look that old. Of course I do. I've been in politics this long. So anyway, I'm very excited about that. I have a little prize for someone that can answer one question for me because I love the little prizes. This is a little backpack, Americans for Prosperity. Who knows or has seen our latest announced speaker for the summit? I will say it's not Arthur Brooks, though he will be there. We announced him last week. It's not Governor Mike Pence. It's not Bill Whittle, though they will be there. It's not Governor Rick Perry, though he will be there. I believe Connie Burton raised her hand first. Imagine that. You are so right. Oh my goodness. She needs a backpack. She has people carrying her stuff now. I will carry your stuff for you. Thanks, Connie. Anyway, why don't we start the program? I'm going to talk about local government. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I'm going to talk about local government. Number one, you asked me to. And also because I have a real passion for that. Now, I can't see the screen and don't have notes, and I don't want to stand in your way. But I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to talk a little bit about the bond initiatives. We're going to talk a little bit about, is that the first slide? Shows how well I know. Oh, okay. And then you're right, move to that slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about why this is so important. So I'm going to start with some facts, and then I'm going to support it with why I care so much about local government debt. I already see questions. How can we have questions already?
Now, there's a wrong figure up there.
There is?
The color is up to 163.
We did not know that because we still haven't seen the final version. So it's up to 163. I would say thank you for that, but oh, that's not thank you for that. That's not great news, but good to know. You guys are definitely in the know in your area. So you probably know these figures much better than I. Some of you may know what the city of Colleyville may end up with. But let's go to the next slide. I'm going to talk about why that is so important. I'm going to talk a little bit about economic freedom tonight, too. And, you know, most of us voters pay very little attention to what's going on at the local level. Isn't that amazing? Because those are, you know, it's what affects us most and what we can most easily impact. But the fact is, when we think of government debt, how many of you see that federal debt clock ticking? And it's frightening, isn't it? I find it really scary. And by the way, I looked it up just today. Our federal debt is over, it's almost $18 trillion. That's almost unfathomable. It's an enormous figure. No question, it far surpasses what we owe in states and local government. However, we know that we can impact one thing most effectively, and that's local government. I'll tell you a little story. I used to think we didn't have the manpower, the people to really work on all the local government issues. And then I started looking around and realized everybody I was working with at the Texas legislature, almost all of them started out where? Local government. They were school board members, city council, county commissioners, and then what about Congress? Same thing. They might have taken a pass through the Texas legislature, but the fact is most politicians start at the local level and they run in nonpartisan races, right? And yet, let's look around and see just what happens. I believe they often learn to overspend, overtax, and overregulate at the local level because nobody's paying attention. And then we reward them and send them to higher office and somehow expect them to act differently. Folks, it just doesn't happen like that. So for that reason, I think local government is really important. If we could go to the next slide, Chris. It'll be a surprise to me too, what it is. Now, the key is we can do better. We here in Texas have really done a great job. And it sounds like I might have just been trashing the Texas legislature, but I have to tell you, I am so proud to be from Texas, especially when I travel other states. Not only do I have that bumper sticker, my state is bigger than yours, but I also love to talk about the fact that Texas is the #1 state for job creation. And why is this? You know, I've heard people talk about it, and I've seen the economists analyze it, and a lot of it has to do with things that happened long before this legislature or I was even working with the Texas legislature. We are a right-to-work state, folks. That is so important. We have no state income tax. We love it like that, and that is so important for job growth. You know, we also have enacted significant tort reform, so businesses can move here with some confidence that they're not going to be sued unnecessarily. So we have a lot to be proud of in Texas. The list goes on and on. I'm going to talk about a little bit of that. Some of these are charts. I'm not going to go over them in detail, but I just want to show you that we actually have the facts and figures. For instance, here, look at Texas. Is the red line there at the top. If you look at non-agriculture employment since 1990, look at this. The second state, Florida. The next is the U.S. Look at how far Texas outpaces the U.S. in job creation. The #1 state for it, far above the other states. And this goes from 1990 all the way up to 2010. Let's look at the next slide, and I'll explain a little bit about what this is. This is job growth. You know, how many of you have heard people try to trash Texas saying, oh, they're just low-paying jobs? We've all heard that. Wrong, not true. I love to give you little facts and figures that you can take to those little naysayers. How many of you have little liberal friends that you have to argue with every now and then? I think we all do. We want these facts and figures just to be able to shut them down. Well, here we go. The figures on your right-hand side show the blue, Texas, the red, the U.S. And believe it or not, look at Texas. We start at the left, and these are the lower paying jobs, and we go to the right, the higher paying jobs. Folks, in Texas, we are creating more higher paying jobs than anybody else, and certainly more than Obama. Look at that. It's pathetic. So on the left-hand side, it's the lowest wage quartile. The right-hand side, the highest wage quartile. And folks, we ought to almost memorize that and be able to share that with folks. That's really important. Then how many of you hear people say, oh, but it's oil and gas? You guys have oil and gas and try to also dish us, acting like that's not important. Oh, that's not the next one. Was there one before this? No? Okay, we'll go to this one. We're going to talk about oil and gas in just a second. Also, how many people know, I love things to brag about Texas, because as I get to travel to our other states, I have plenty of audiences that I get to rub it in. And so I love to remind people that Texas is also the top state in the country for exporting. How many Texans know that? We don't all know that. It is pretty amazing. Look at the U.S. average minus Texas, that red line. And look at the blue line. That is Texas exporting. Pretty remarkable. So Obama really should get out his pen and his phone and write a thank you note and call Texas legislature to say thank you so much and thank you, Governor Perry, but I don't hear that happening. Let's see, what is this next one? Oh, and also, we've all seen the housing market taken such a drop across the country, haven't we, under this administration? And that red line is the U.S. housing market. But folks, look at Texas. It has been a steady incline and then almost leveling off. Now there's something good and bad about that I'm going to remind you folks. How many of you remember back when Dan Patrick started his organization Clout, and it was all about property taxes, lower our unfair property taxes? Well folks, we were at a time then when appraisals were growing so rapidly and local governments could say, oh, didn't raise your tax rates, but they dug a lot deeper into our pockets because our appraisals went up and they didn't lower the rates by virtue of that. So folks, we're in that time again. How many of you got your appraisals this year and were shocked at how much they increased? How many of you are protesting? I hope that you did. But the fact is, we have been really had a very steady housing market here in Texas because of our relative good economy. Now, we've taken a little dip, but we have been the leader in the country for job creation, and we're doing a great job. Let's go to the next one. Oh, yay, we finally get here. This is one. Now, guess where, because you probably can't read underneath unless you've got really good glasses or good eyes, which I don't, that one of these represents oil and gas. One would think that it would be, this is job creation in Texas, the blue line's going up. Folks, this is pretty darn amazing. Oil and gas extraction and mining, right there. Right there. Isn't that amazing? That many jobs, 17.6 million, but it is only 2.6% of our job creation. Isn't that amazing? So next time somebody says, oh, Texas is growing jobs just because of oil and gas, what are you going to say? Not so. It's only 2.6%. We're beating everybody else and everything else too. Let's go to the next slide. Now, here's an interesting thing. How many of you have been following economic freedom issues? And I kind of recognize, I know Connie Burton you have because you do your homework. She's one of these kids I could tell in school, always raised her hand and always had the answer. Made me look bad. But the fact is, Texas is #1 and has been #1 in economic performance rank. And that really means right now we're doing really well. We're beating the other 50 states, and don't we love that? I do. We love that. But folks, our outlook is not so rosy. The economic outlook is that we are #12. And we have actually, let's go to the next slide, it might give us a little bit more. And since even 2008, we were #13, #10, #19, 18, 16. The fact is, we haven't even been in the top 10 since 2009. And when you look at the economic indicators, and I won't bore you with what all the economists do with that, but I look at those, I don't do it, but I look at those, and the fact is there is one key indicator that pulls Texas down, and that is what? Anybody have a guess?
Immigration.
Illegal immigration. No, a good answer. Very timely answer. It's actually local government debt. That is the one area where Texas does the worst. Our local government is deep in debt. I've got all kinds of rationale and reasons for it, but I'm going to talk a little bit about that today and why that's such a bad thing. #1, it's a bad thing because it pulls down our economy. It's not going to look so good in the future unless we start turning things around. Now, folks, how many of you knew that Texas local governments are $322 billion in debt? $1 billion in debt. We have a few smarties right here in this room, not at all surprised. But the fact is we are. And if you look at that, the cities and school districts are the majority of that. School districts, I want to say about 107 billion, and cities about 99. Is it still a little bit under that? About 96 billion. Now, how many of you, when you see bond initiatives on the ballot, think local debt and tax increases? I think we make a mistake because we call bond initiatives a bond, and so many of us think of bonds as investments. And how many of us also hear these local officials say, this is an investment in our kids' future, this is an investment in our city. And we have this civic pride, we care about the kids and all that, so we have this tendency to vote for it no matter what. Well, let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about, here's the city debt just within Tarrant County. Now, I will tell you, we pull all of our figures from the Texas Bond Review Board website. How many of you have been on that website? I have to tell you, I love that website. I know I'm a nerd. I should have a plastic protector over my pocket. But the fact is, it's always interesting to me wherever I go and speak, I want to tell them about what's going on in their own community. A lot of folks know, but more people don't know than do know. And the fact is that we have an opportunity every single day to change that, but seldom do we. Now, I will be the first to say, I am not chastising any of us as citizens. Look at where you are tonight. You could have stayed home and not ventured out in this lovely rain. But I thank you for being here. But the fact is, what do we have at our local government level? We have city council meetings, we have county commissioner court meetings, we have school board meetings, we have water board, we have, you name it, community colleges. We have all these local taxing entities. Some people have, 10 or more local taxing entities on their local property tax bill. Do most of you look at that local property tax bill and see who all you're paying taxes to and how much you're paying? It's so important. I wish really that we could write them a check every year to each one of them. If we wrote that check, I think we pay a lot more attention to just how much we're spending in local government spending and in debt. Now, the ISD debt in Tarrant County, here are several independent school districts and their current debt. Now folks, when I say current debt, I count principal plus interest. And I do so for one reason. There are outliers like, let's say, Leander ISD that owes twice as much in principal, and twice as much in interest as they do in principal. Wow. Isn't that shocking? And it's because they front-loaded it. They said, oh, we're not going to have to pay for 5 years, or we're going to pay just interest for 5 years. They put that off, and sure enough, the interest grows, and they owe twice as much as interest in principal. It should be the other way around or closer to that. So folks, right here in Tarrant County, we've got so much local government debt, and we have opportunities always to make that change. Let's go to the next slide. Tarrant County debt, that's just the county alone, just the county government, local government debt. And that's almost $500 million. Most counties aren't that much in debt. It's a big county though. Let's go to the next slide. And we talk about local government. It is a drain on our economy. And the fact is, local government is growing faster than the local population and inflation. If we go to the next one, I tried to put a little map on there. I pulled this from the comptroller's website. She did a study on local debt. And if you can see, the green line is local debt outstanding. Now, she included only the principal, not the interest. Now, the next line, the purple colored line, is local government expenditures. And guess what? That red line at the bottom is just population and inflation. So if we hear, oh, but we're growing so fast, well, we may be growing fast, but we're spending so much more than we are growing. Hi, Sam Sheets. How many of you know Sam? Sam, if you don't know him, you want to get to know him because we are so proud to have him representing us here in Tarrant County. I know he's working with a number of you, and as you'll see, I'm going to push your working with him too, I hope. So the key is our local government spending and debt is growing so much faster than the population and inflation. Folks, it's just simply not sustainable. We can't continue this forever. Let's go to the next slide. And the comptroller, Susan Combs, said it really well because she studied this very carefully. Prudent financial management at all levels of government is crucial to ensuring Texas remains the desirable destination for business and an affordable place for Texans to live and work. That's what we're all going for. Let's go to the next slide, if you will. Now, here we look at Texas debt per person. Federal debt, wow, $47,000. You know, I have to tell you, some of you are my generation, but I will say the younger generations, and when I speak to them, I always say this, I want to apologize. I want to apologize for what my generation has done to your generation. Because the fact is, we're the first generation of Americans to leave our kids worse off than we were. Our parents didn't do that to us, but that's exactly what we're doing here. Texans owe Texas state debt. Most states can't carry a lot of debt, so it's still substantial. $1,577 is a lot of money. And in local debt, every Texan owes $7,507, and that is as of 2011. How many bonds have we passed since then? But that was what was in her latest report, so I quoted that from the report. And the truth is, we all know that local government really does matter. It is closest to the people, and we do literally see our local officials everywhere. You see them in the grocery store, at church, you see them at your kids' schools or grandkids' schools. So they really are right there. And I will say, I believe part of our problem is these local officials are very much influenced, not as much by us who sent them there, because we sent them there and washed our hands and went on leading our lives, taking care of our kids, volunteering in our communities, working, etc. But folks, who do we hand them over to? We hand them over to these organizations, which we are funding with our tax dollars. Cities join the Texas Municipal League, counties join the Texas Association of Counties and Schools, all join the Texas Association of School Boards, where they then are those elected officials, the county commissioners, the school board members, the city council members, all go through their indoctrination training. Let's go to the next one because I want to. And I'll share with you a little thing. Here's an example of why we need to counter these organizations. There was a hearing the last day of last month, and Texas Municipal League's General Counsel spoke at this hearing. It was Land and Resource Management House hearing here in Texas. And the General Counsel said a most amazing thing. He said, let me see if it's quoted in the next slide, because I want to do it justice. Now this is actually from Paul Workman, and we have taken a clip of exactly what the Texas Municipal League General Counsel said, and we're going to have that on our website this week, but have him saying it. But Paul Workman questioned him, because the TML General Counsel said that really the days of you and me being able to do whatever we want to do on our property, that's old news. We can't do that anymore. It doesn't make sense anymore. Who is shocked and frightened by that statement? I am frightened by that. The Texas Municipal League is willing to say private property rights really don't mean anything anymore, because we, the city, ought to be able to take your land and tell you what you can and cannot do on your land. And that's exactly what the General Counsel there said. Fortunately, Paul Workman sat in on that hearing. He wasn't even on the committee. He said, I want to make sure I understand you. Is this what you said? And Mr. Houston, the General Counsel for TML, he responded by saying, absolutely, that's what I said. Folks, that's what we're up against. Let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to wrap this little booger up. Okay, if you're not frightened by that statement, I am frightened enough for all of us. But it is scary to hear those words from the General Counsel of one of the most powerful organizations in the state. But the fact is, folks, TML also opposes our effort to keep property taxes low, our effort to limit Texan expenditures. The Texas Association of School Boards openly opposes school choice. Heaven forbid that we would take our money and send our kids to another non-public, non-government school. And the TAC also opposes the Texas, Texan expenditure limitations. By the way, I sued TAC a few years ago because they were lobbying with my money, and I won that lawsuit, but the judge gave them an out. So let me tell you, we need to take these groups on. Let's go to this last slide. What can you do? Well, number one, you're doing it. Look at where you are tonight when you could be doing other things. And thank you for being here. You can learn about your local government debt. Attend some of those meetings. Don't attend them all, but make sure somebody's attending every meeting. Let me tell you, that acts differently when you're there. And if you play like this as a cell phone, if you sit there in the audience doing this, and they think you're recording them, they act a lot differently. Trust me. It's a lot of fun even if you're not recording it. You can tell they love to see me come in. Ask a lot of questions, but you can also just ask one very pointed, good question. If you're attending one of their meetings, give me a call, or call Sam, if you want a good question to ask, we'll help you. Because the fact is, one quick story, my school board member called me one time to say, please don't oppose this bond initiative we're going to float. And I said, well, tell me about it. She tells me about it. And I said, well, tell me, how much debt are we carrying currently? I'm in Round Rock ISD. How much debt are we carrying in Round Rock ISD? You could have heard crickets. I said, well, I said, no, she spoke first, to her credit. And she said, I'm ashamed to say I don't know. She was on the school board asking me to approve more debt, to not oppose them on more debt. And I said, you know, you should be ashamed. But the fact is, most on the school board probably don't know, or they don't want you to. The superintendent don't want you to. By the way, it was $1.2 billion for my school district. The other thing, involve your friends and colleagues. Don't do this alone. Look at the army of activists and friends you have right here. Work together to take back your local government and join Americans for Prosperity. That's one thing you can do. And work with Sam Sheets. Raise your hand again, Sam. You want to get to know him because he will help. So I hope you'll sign up today. And one last thing, we also have all this information on local government debt over on that table. We are promoting our Defending the American Dream Summit. If you want to know how to be a great local activist, it is the end of August in Dallas. We usually have it in Washington, D.C. Again, we're going to be right here in Dallas. You heard who our key speakers are. We're so excited to announce Ben Carson. Just last week, we'll have more people we'll be announcing, and hope you'll be joining us. By the way, Sam came a little bit late because we have been on our 10 days of action, right, Sam? And I was phone banking and block walking, but on Saturday phone banking. And our 10 days of action, Americans for Prosperity and our activists made over 140,000 phone calls and knocked on over 36,000 doors across the country.